According to the latest data obtained by the Department of Consensus and Statistics, as you can see in this table, more than 95% of the housing units in Sri Lanka, they have slope roofs. So while it is easy to convert a flat roof into a green roof, there are very limited options available to convert a slope roof, an existing slope roof, to a green roof. So what we have done is, we have developed a vegetated roofing tile that can convert existing slope roofs into green roofs with minimal effort. So the main objective of this research was to develop a substrate mix that can successfully support plants in this vegetated roofing tile. So first So first we did a literature survey and we identified the factors that should be present in the substrate that is used in a green roof. So we found that in a green roof, majority of the load comes from the substrate. And also when it rains, the substrate becomes saturated, which increases the overall weight of the system. So it is important for the substrate to have a low wet and dry bulk density. According to the US and German green roof guidelines, they say to achieve a low wet and dry bulk density, majority, that means around 80% of the constituents of the green roof, it should be made out of inorganic materials. But also the substrate should have some organic materials to provide the macro and micronutrients that are needed. But as the organic component increases, the stability of the substrate comes into question. Because as the organic matter decomposes, the substrate tends to settle. Therefore, the US and German green roof guidelines, they say that the organic composition should be restricted to around 4 to 10% by volume. The water holding capacity, which is WHC, is another important parameter, especially on a rooftop because drought-like conditions exist. So the substrate should be able to hold sufficient water to support plant growth during these drought-like conditions. Air-filled porosity is another important parameter, because oxygen diffusion through the substrate is important for successful plant growth. Also, the pH of the substrate should be maintained at a range so that the plant roots can absorb the necessary nutrients. So as we have identified from various standards and literature, the relevant parameters, the values for each of the parameters is listed in this table. So it is not possible for one spade to possess all of these properties. So there is no one universal green roof. What is generally done is you take different materials with different properties, mix them at a defined ratio to obtain a substrate mix that meets these criteria. So when you are selecting materials to go into the green roof substrate, there are several parameters that you have to pay attention to. And all this, it is recommended to incorporate local waste material into the green roof substrate because it can provide multifaceted benefits. For example, it can help to improve the properties of the substrate. It can help to reduce the overall cost of the system. And at the same time, to incorporate waste materials, it helps to increase the green rating of the building. So the possibility of using locally available waste materials in Sri Lanka as constituents in the green roof substrate, it has not yet been studied. So in this study, we selected rice husk as our organic component. So Sri Lanka being an agricultural country, our main food crop is rice, and as such, we generate large amounts of rice husk annually. And also, rice husk, it possesses some properties that makes it as an ideal candidate to be used as green roof substrate material. Another one we selected, an inorganic material this time, was crushed bricks. So in Sri Lanka, in our construction sector, one of the main masonry units we use is clay bricks. So the construction sector generates large amounts of brick waste during demolition activities. And also, bricks contain some properties that makes it suitable to be used as a green roof substrate. So we developed 12 samples. Component as 20% and 80% of it was made from inorganic materials. For the organic materials, we selected compost, wire and rice husk, which is our waste material. For the inorganic, we used sand and recycled crushed bricks. So we developed 4 series. In the first series, we kept sand and brick at equal volume. And in series 2, we used only sand. In series 3, we used 50% sand and 30% brick. And in series 4, we used 30% sand and 50% brick. And within each series, we varied the organic composition of the organic constituents. Compost we always kept as 10%. In the first sample, we took equal amounts of coir and rice husk. And in sample 2, we just used rice husk. And in sample 3, we just used coir. So in this method, way we developed altogether 12 samples. The sand that we used, this is the ASTM medium grade size we used for the sand, and crushed brick sizes are conform to the ASTM size guidelines. So these are the parameters that we tested. To check whether the substrate mixes that we have developed are suitable to be used as a substrate in an extensive green roof. So initially, the sample was oven dried at 105 degrees Celsius for 2 hours and the dry bulk density was determined. So as you can see here, series 2, it had the highest dry bulk density. So this is the set of samples that had only sand and no crushed bricks. What we found was that as the crushed brick percentage increased, the dry density it reduced. And as you can see in green, that is series 4, which had the highest percentage of crushed bricks, it had the lowest dry bulk density. In a green roof, we don't want a very low dry bulk density as well, because especially on a rooftop, the wind is very intense. So if the substrate is very lightweight, then it can be easily blown off. Next, we tested for the compaction. So the samples were saturated in water for 24 hours. Next, it was allowed to drain freely under gravity for 24 hours and we determined the wet bulk density. After placing the samples in the oven, we determined the moisture content at 100% saturation. So using these values, we developed the compaction curve for each series. In a substrate, if the substrate is too compacted, then the roots do not have the freedom to grow. And also, if the substrate is too loose, also it is not successful because there should be sufficient contact between the soil and the roots. So here we found that series 1, so orange color is our series 2, which had only sand. So the samples with only sand had a very high compaction, and when the samples that had the highest percentage of crushed bricks, it was too loose. So series 1 and series 3 provided us with ideal compaction. Next, we tested for the water holding capacity. We used the percolation method to test for the water holding capacity. The soil samples were finely powdered and placed in an oven. And then a known mass of sample was placed in a filter paper in a funnel. And then we poured about 50 milliliters of water through this setup, and the amount of water collected on the cylinder was measured. And using that equation, we calculated the water holding capacity. What we found was that in the sample that did not have any crushed bricks, the water holding capacity, which is shown in blue here, it was the lowest. And as the percentage of crushed bricks increased, the water holding capacity also increased. And if you can see here, within a series, you can see that always sample 2, it has a lower water holding capacity than the other two. So sample 2 is the sample that had only rice husk. we can see that when we incorporated coir, actually the water holding capacity increased when you compare it with the rice husk. We tested for the pH as well. The pH of all the soil samples were within the accepted range. Next, to check for the air-filled porosity, we used the Australian standard method for potting mixers, and this is how we developed our apparatus. So it consisted of two parts, the upper part and the lower part, which should be connected together to form like a cylinder. And in the bottom part, there were four holes that were made. So the substrate was filled in this apparatus, and then it was placed in a water bath for 30 minutes, and it was allowed to drain freely for 10 minutes. So this was repeated for about 3 times, and then after the third cycle, the top half was removed and the bottom part was covered with a piece of cloth, and it was again immersed in water for 10 minutes, and it was allowed to drain for 30 minutes, and the amount of water that was drained, we used it in the equation and calculated the air-filled porosity. For this part of the experiment, we selected only series 1 and series 3 because those are the series that provided us with the most ideal results. So, 1 is shown in blue and series 3 is shown in orange. So so the blue color samples, they have a higher percentage of crushed bricks. And as you can see clearly, the samples with the higher percentage of crushed bricks had a higher air-filled porosity. And also we can say that in both series, sample 2 showed the lowest air-filled porosity. So sample 2 is the sample that contained only rice husk. So the samples that contained showed us more promising results. We tested for the permeability as well using the constant air permeability test, and again we found that sample 2, that is the sample with just rice husk and no coir, showed a significantly lower permeability compared to the sample that had coir. So in conclusion, I can say that by including crushed bricks into the green roof substrate, we actually managed to improve various properties of the substrate. However, by including rice husk, we did not see any significant improvement in the performance. So these substrate mixes should be tested under field experiments as well, which is currently being carried out as a part of my research. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gayatri. Is it possible to give us more future?
මගේ අතරම රිසර්ච් එකේ තියෙන්නේ අපි pitched roof එකක් කියන්නේ slope roof එකක් green roof එකක් කරන method එකක් තමයි මගේ overall research එක. ඒතර ඒකේ component එකක් තමයි මේක. එතකොට අර අපි කලින් පෙන්වුවා වගේ අර අපි tile එකක් develop කරලා තියෙනවා. ඒ tile එක පාවිච්චි කරලා slope roof එකක් green roof එකක් කරන්න. එතකොට ඒකේ අපි ඒ tile එකට දාන මොන පස් වර්ගයේද කියන එක තමයි අපි මෙතනින් හෙව්වේ. ඒකට අපි හිතුවා තව green grading එක building එක improve කරන්න පුළුවන් කියලා අපිට waste materials දාන්න පුළුවන් නම් මේ අපි ගන්න substrate එකට. එතකොට අපි ඒකට තමයි අපි check කරේ bricks උයි rice husk උයි දෙකම අපි incorporate කරලා අපි බලුවා මොකද්ද promising results දෙන්නේ කියලා. ඒතර අපි අතන එක crushed bricks දැම්මම properties improve වුණා. හැබැයි rice husk දැම්මම අපි coir එක compare කරාම coir එක තමයි අතරම හොඳ performance එකක් දුන්නේ compared to rice husk.
Thank you. ප්‍රශ්න මොනවද තියෙනවා නම් ඒක දැනගන්න පුළුවන්. I would like to ask a question. If you calculate the cost, because the coil does usually prices can go up because we have very good export market of coil. So what do you think?
Yes, sir, that is why we tried with the rice husk. That is why we wanted to see if it is possible to replace the coir with the rice husk. But as per the results, the coir ones showed the better performance. But what we did was we also tried rice husk and coir. So you can reduce the amount of coir that you're using. Those samples also showed promising results. So I believe in that way you can reduce the amount of coir used by substituting part of it with the rice husk.
Can you substitute it by wood? I mean,
yes, sir, but some of the wood chips that we find as wet, some of it is treated. So maybe we will have to check whether natural ones maybe, sir.
Because some problem in certain parts like can be close to 40%, sometimes they have waste material in the, so it's one option, but I think it's maybe you might get different results because compression can vary because depending on the trees, which something might contain to other compounds. And what about how do you identify the clean mix? Because waste material is usually contaminated with cement.
Cement,
So
yes.
maybe that way affect the pH. And
If it does contain cement, it can affect the pH. Remove the cement part and we might put to relatively clean.
thank you very much.
Thank you, Gayatri. I have to compliment on your research work. So I have small, I want you to clarify this one for me. So I have a small concern on the pH. So with the atmosphere contains a lot of substances and these materials can chemically react. That's right, chemically react, right? So these compositions may change gradually. Is there a risk of this? So the pH will change. So that means you have to attain it frequently.
Yes, actually now we are doing field experiments. So with the plants, so we are checking that, especially with the rain, because with the rain runoff also we don't want the pH to increase. But bricks generally have a stable pH, so that is why we thought of taking bricks also. But we did check for the pH without doing any planting, just the soil sample. We checked for the pH, and all the samples were within the range, acceptable range for the plant roots to absorb the nutrients.
The second stage
We are testing that on during field experiments.
I have another question. So again, about the transpiration of these plants. So when they are installed at the roof, so high operation may happen. So thereby you may have to limit it to some of plants. So some of the crops. So are there suggestions, any limitations or any suggestions that you can say that these crops are more suitable?
Yes, we have actually developed like a plant selection matrix. So it contains about 18 points. So if you select a plant, it has to go through all those 18 points, and finally, if it is suitable only, you can use it in the system. So some of the things is like it should be able to grow in a very thin soil, and it should be drought tolerant. And also, it should not be poisonous to humans. So it should be a native plant. It should not be an invasive species. So and also it shouldn't contain any thorns. So we have like a checklist, like an 18-point checklist to identify the plants that can go in the system as well.
Some may even expose to some pollens as well that may create allergic reactions.
Yes, and also whether it is an annual or perennial, because we want the system to last for a long time. So we only select plants that can self-propagate and not we didn't select any annual. So like that we had a checklist.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gayatri, for your attempt in developing green roof substrate, environmental friendly green roof substrate. So let us thank Ms. Gayatri in the usual manner. With that, let us move to the second presentation. Let me invite Ms.